Hi guys, it is time to talk the Real Housewives of New Jersey. I'm doing a two-part series. I'm excited to do this. We're going to be talking Joe Gorga, Joe Giudice, Teresa and Melissa, but most importantly, two-part series. I'm going to give you guys the reason for the conflict between Joe Gorga and Joe Giudice, okay? We all know that by the time the Gorgas came on to the Real Housewives of New Jersey, there was already a serious conflict brewing between the two couples, the two families, whatever you want to say. So we're going to talk about that. Everything in this video, of course, is alleged. I'm going to repeat that several times. But before we get started, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you subscribe, and make sure you put that notification button on because I'm always posting different times, giving you guys the tea. So yeah, make sure you subscribe. All right. Also, want to let you guys know, two-part series. If you are a tree hugger, then you may like part one better. And if you love Melissa, then you may like part two better. That's, just how it goes. It's okay if we have different opinions on our favorite housewives. This channel is for all of us to just kiki and gossip about what's going on with Bravo and what we know. So as long as we're being respectful to each other, that's all it's about. But let's go ahead and jump in. So I am going to have to talk a little bit about their parents, Joe and Teresa's parents, and I'm going to try to be as gentle as I can about the subject because they are passed away. And I also want to let you guys know that there is a lot more to the story about the two Joes, and I'm not really going to touch base on any of the the sexual part of it. So if you are interested in what was, been included in this story, then you definitely can do your own research and you will find it. But we're going to go allegedly. So Joe, this is also a good reason to kind of explain why Teresa always referred to Melissa as a gold digger, okay? So I told you guys before that Joe Gorga was engaged 3 times before he ended up marrying Melissa. And so I'm sure that Melissa and Teresa did start off on a bad foot because Teresa probably didn't even think that he was going to end up marrying her. And then when they got married, she probably was like, they're definitely going to stay together. And then by the time she had 3 kids and, down the line, the damage was already done. So, but what's important to know is that the allegations always were that there was a business transaction that included Joe's parents' house being used as collateral. The loan was defaulted and his parents ended up losing their home and they moved in with Teresa and Joe Giudice. Now, to corroborate that story, we do know that when they were building their home, they were filming at the time. And so Joe Giudice did say that he was going to make a loft for Teresa's parents to live there. And we do see a little bit of Joe Gorga kind of having he didn't really like that idea if you watch the season. I'm telling you guys, there's a lot of people on Twitter that are going back and starting season 1, episode 1 and re-watching. And it is completely worth it. Seriously, there is so much that I forgot. I rewatched it 2 years ago and it was great. It was just like watching it for the first time because it's been so long. Now this video is going to give you guys content that is not on the series that you didn't see, but going back and watching it another time, especially like hindsight, it's pretty good. You should definitely do it if you get a chance because it's worth it. So anyways, back to this business transaction. So it's important to understand that Joe Gorga's dad had everything paid off. He owed nothing until 2005 whenever this house shows up. So Joe Gorga buys the plot for $950,000, almost close to $1 million. Him and Melissa want to build on it. They have to get a construction loan. They put 2 homes up for collateral. The 2 homes, the addresses, you can look all of this up, guys. One of them was on Mermaid Road, and that's allegedly their lake house, or the one on the Jersey Shore. And then they also put a home up on Summer Street in Paterson, New Jersey, and that was alleged their parents' home. Again, look it all up. They had a 9% interest rate on the mansion that they built. They owed 3.8 on it, or they owed 3 on it, and they were trying to get 3.8. And they had maxed the value to the top. They had taken all of the equity out of the home, a loan against all of the equity. They also had, what's important to remember, is called a balloon mortgage. So basically that's like you pay less monthly, but you owe more. It's like every 2 years or 3 years it comes renewed, and you have to pay a big bulk of money at one time. And so it works well for someone if you're going to be selling the home, because then you can just pay that bulk when you sell it if you're only planning on holding on to it for a couple of months. They had to refinance and do this transaction several different times between 2006 2007. They get the construction loan. Melissa's name at that point is added to the deed of the home. Now, if you had a family member that had a wife, I think Joe Gorga loves Melissa, and I think that he would do anything to keep her happy. I think that he had a lot of ambition to give her and her children a good life, and I think she wanted to be on the Real Housewives of New Jersey very, very badly, okay? So badly that I think he would maybe not do so much honest things. He's ready to do whatever to get on the show is what I'm trying to say. And he loves Melissa, and he wants to prove to her that he's like a great worker, and he has all this money, and he can give her this amazing life. And to do that, in the process, the parents end up losing their home. And so to Teresa, I'm sure that had to be frustrating. I'm sure that she probably blamed Melissa, because we all know how much Joe Gorga loved his parents, and we know how much he wanted their respect. So what would put him in jeopardy of losing their effing house, defaulting on a loan and losing their house? That's a big deal, guys. That's a really, really, really big deal. And if he did that on the accord because Melissa was spending too much, or he wanted to impress her, whatever the case may be, it would be natural that Teresa and Joe would have some animosity towards Joe and even Melissa, because they blame her. That's where they get the whole gold digger thing. Then Teresa, Giudice, and Joe felt responsible for the parents. Now, another reason she's probably resentful is because she never, ever brought that to the camera. She never brought that up on camera. And that's why it's almost hard to believe, because of the fact that it is so easy to find the information. Like, literally all you have to do is look it up online. The deed of their parents' house, like the transfer, a lot of people spoke on how weird it was, because it just had like the dad's name. Joe signed, and then Frank Catania was the witness on it. You're also supposed to have a notary, so it's very possible that Frank was the notary because he was an attorney. Regardless, I think, again, because Teresa and Joe got into all this legal trouble, and they had to have, their books were opened up, their finances were scrutinized for years and years, even after they got in trouble, because you have to think about it. Teresa had to pay restitution. They had to pay all of that money back. She had to think about how Joe was going to support the girls while she was away a year in prison, because I think she was like negotiating, she was making money off her cookbooks and her cook shows and her book signings, and that she was literally being the bread maker with those type of events. And I think that because of the financial struggles that they had, their books were open, and everyone knew their business, and everyone knew like where their money went and what was messed up, and everything had been, the veil had been lifted on the Giudices. Like, there wasn't much we didn't know about, especially about their finances. And because there was so much light on Teresa and Joe, because it was a very long process. That's what I'm saying, guys. Go back and watch season 1. Go back and start from the beginning. It was a long process between them going bankrupt. Then they are asked to show the government all their assets. They do that, and the government finds out that they didn't list all their assets. They get in trouble for that. This is originally why they got indicted, allegedly. And then they have court, they have more court, negotiations, they're filming, they end up getting sentenced, then they, film Teresa going to jail. It was just a long, long time of the light always being on Teresa and Joe, and Melissa and Joey were able, I think, to really sweep a lot under the rug, because the light was shining so hard on Teresa and Joe. And even though that wasn't Melissa and Joe Gorga's fault, it still probably felt really shitty, considering they knew what was going on with Melissa and Joe and the facade that they were putting up, and the fact that Joe and Teresa were, took in her parents. I'm sure that had to cause a lot of animosity, okay? Now, let's talk a little bit more. This was another crazy thing that I found out. They were renting that Bentley. If you guys remember in the episode, well, you know what? Let me go backwards for a second. I want to tell you guys something else that was really juicy. So Kim D did an interview, and allegedly, when she first started filming on The Real Housewives of New Jersey, you guys might know this, but production found her because she was at Caroline's house for her annual party to raise money for the local police districts. I know it's crazy because they're like mob related and they're raising money for the police, whatever, but the production meets her, right? And they start talking. They find out she owns a shop, and the women, of course, start shopping there. But mainly, production's working with Kim D because they really want to keep Danielle on the show. They know she makes for great TV, but nobody's talking to Danielle. All this has taken place with Dina, and nobody wants to talk to Danielle. So they kind of used Kim D as someone to, be the person that everyone was connected to, right? So she worked with production a lot, and she said she used to cook them up because they would want to go to clubs and restaurants and stuff in the city, and she had a lot of contacts. Now, the allegations and one of the biggest fights between Melissa and Teresa has always been that Teresa said she did not know that Joe and Melissa were coming on the show. Now, a couple of things. We do know that Melissa was messaging Danielle season 1. We know that she was DMing Andy Cohen. We know that she was on Facebook posting about the sprinkle cookies and tagging Teresa and tagging Andy Cohen. But what we didn't know was, according to Kim D, Melissa also sent Bravo an audition tape. And the producers told Kim D that if we would see that video, we would just die because she was talking so poorly about Teresa and Joe Giudice to get on The Real Housewives, okay? I'm going to get into the whole christening thing. I have more and more to go on about the feud between Melissa and Teresa, but I just kind of want to stick to the, Gorgas and the real estate transactions for the moment. Okay. Now, Melissa also, if you remember, it was probably the season where Joe Gorga buys the shredded truck that they're going to go and get into the business of shredding documents. They're driving a black Bentley, and they take it to the shop because Melissa's always wrecking the Bentley. And come to find out, Melissa received a citation while she was driving in the Bentley, and the owner came back to his last name is Khan, Bobby. And allegedly, Melissa received a traffic citation in the Bentley who belonged to a Bobby Khan who happened to be wanted by the FBI. So that was very difficult for her to explain why she would be driving a Bentley that she made everyone on the show think was hers. And then actually it happens to be someone who's wanted by the FBI. That's crazy. I know a lot of women, they do rent cars for the show, but it kind of agitates me a little bit because Joe and Melissa, they made a really big deal about the Bentley, and they took it to the shop, and because, Melissa had wrecked it, and it was this whole big thing, and then to find out really it was just someone who was wanted by the FBI's car that they were renting, that's not really cool. Now, the last piece of tea I'm going to give you guys, and I actually had completely forgotten about this. Now, Melissa validates this because she told us that her mother moved her to Florida when she was a senior in high school. Now, Melissa was arrested for shoplifting in 1997, okay? She was 19 years old. Whatever, right? She was in Clearwater, Florida. They let her go on her own recognizance to show up in court. And she never returned for a court date. And so 9 months passed, and the judge issued a bench warrant for her. She still never went to court. She never called them. She never did anything until 2011, when the National Enquirer found an open warrant on Melissa well, her last name wasn't Gorga then, it was her maiden name, but she had an open warrant in Florida in Clearwater. Now, because she hadn't been into any trouble and because she reached out to Florida officials, she was able to get it taken care of. She obviously probably just paid court costs and a fine, something along those lines. The boutique that she was stealing from actually had been bought out by Kaufman's, Macy's, and so, you know, they really weren't trying to prosecute her, you know, 10 years later. But it's just crazy that the National Enquirer would find an open warrant on Melissa Gorga. And then, of course, you know, we talked about the Chanel bags that, you know, were being sold at Envy that were not real, and that these patrons had to, like, start leaving reviews because, you know, they wanted their money back. And Melissa knew that the purses were not legitimate, and she was, like, kind of deterring people from getting refunds. Another thing patrons wanted to add was that Kim D did make the allegations that allegedly the buildings that Joe Gorga owns, we saw these buildings whenever him and Melissa first came on the show. I think she takes the kids to his job to see him, and they go for a walk down the street, and he points out like 3 big buildings that he owns, and he says that each of them will be like one for each child. Now, the buildings are not in the children's names. I don't know if I mentioned to you guys before, a lot of the deeds and a lot of information that's registered is registered to Giuseppe and Gorga, which would be Giudice and Gorga, because they were in business together a lot, guys. And so nothing is in the kids' names, nothing. But these were made into apartments. And Kim D alleged on Behind the Velvet Rope that during the COVID, there was, you know, rice. There was mice, and there was also no heat sometimes in these buildings, and these poor people had nobody. There was like no one to reach out to, no one to call. It was like COVID, and so allegedly he left a lot of tenants without heat during COVID for a while. So that's kind of a messed up thing to do if that's what he did. That's all alleged, of course. So fast forward to the christening, right? We're gonna talk about the fact that Teresa claims she didn't know Melissa and Joey were coming on the show, because Kim D gives us some more details regarding that. And then Joe Gorga tells us, he does an interview and he tells us all about the christening and how producers were high-fiving afterwards because it was such great TV. But we're going to get into that in part 2, so make sure you hit the like button and follow, subscribe, and then check out my part 2 on the christening. And this would be more for team, I would say, I don't know, Team Melissa fans. Yeah. Mm-hmm.